Dear 2023, this year we had some highs and some lows. We had our setbacks and our breakthroughs. This year was many things. But if I had to sum it all up, it would be one word. Okay. Okay. And not okay like you probably think I mean okay. Not okay as in average or mediocre. Not okay as in, I'll just conform, settle for less. But okay as in a beautiful acceptance. I was recently shown a circle. A giant circle, and within this circle was another little circle. Was then told that the giant circle is life, and the little circle within it is what we are able to control in life. A giant discrepancy, obviously. And that idea, that concept, it moved me. In 2023, it moved me because I've spent countless hours, I've exhausted time and energy looking back, worrying about those things I can't control. I've spent time trying to move immovable objects and have come to realize that it's okay those things exist. It's okay they are the way they are. It's okay I feel the way I feel, because that little area I can control gives life to some pretty incredible things. 2023, you showed me that it's okay to be different. This year, I've really stepped out of my comfort zone. I've stepped into rooms and teamed up with folks way more accomplished, at least in the business sense. And what I've found is that many of those folks are very different than I am. Not different in a bad way, just different. And I found myself starting to ask, how can I be more like them? Now, the reality is there are pieces of value and inspiration you can take from everyone. But it's also true that being like them is not what got me into the room to begin with. It's being me. In 2023, you helped me understand that I want different things. I'm energized in different ways. I measure success by my own metrics, and that's okay. The power is in taking what makes you different and not trying to camouflage it, not manipulating it to be some watered down version of what you think you're supposed to be, but rather holding it up as your banner, because it's okay to be you. 2023, this year I walked away from a lot while under your guidance. A reshuffling of my daily tasks and priorities, how I spent my time and who I spent it with, even where I live. It gets real easy to accept things as they are, because what they are brings about certainty. But 2023, you reminded me that it's okay to leave what you know for something that you don't. That being misaligned is enough of a reason in and of itself to seek out adjustment. And I think along the same lines, that feeling in your stomach that basically says something's not right here, that it's okay to feel that. It pulls you away from the wrong things and towards the right things. Not everyone, not everything is for you. And that's okay. 2023, you reminded me that, hey, sometimes things go wrong. That when we take risks, one of two things can happen. We either succeed or we don't. And when we don't, life gives us wisdom and pushes us closer to the things that do work. I took some chances this year. Some worked, some didn't. And that's okay, right? The ball does not need to leave the yard every time you swing. There's still value in the at-bat, right? In 2023, I know that sounds a little cliche, but most truths do. The issue is that when you're in them, you forget. It's not so intuitive amidst the chaos. That's what makes life interesting. And in fact, I believe the only way to lose in life is to never step up to that plate. Doing nothing is a death sentence. And so 2023, you reminded me sometimes the wheels fall off the wagon, and that's okay. Because at least you were in transit to a place that meant something. 2023, we will feel emotions we don't want to feel. That's okay. What matters is where we go from those inflection points. 2023, fate will often hand us outcomes that are far from ideal, and that's okay. What matters is how we pick up the pieces. 2023, life shows us from time to time who we are not, and that's okay. As long as we hold dear who we are and delve into it with conviction. Never have I ever thought the words "it's okay" would matter. Never would I have imagined, disassociating them with weakness or mediocrity and coupling them with strength. 2023, life is so much better, happier, freer when we stop fighting invisible monsters. When we stop resisting and instead look to master that little piece of life that is ours to control. Who are you? Good. Own that. Make your mistakes. Explore the fringes of life as if the world were some giant buffet where you take what's meaningful and leave the rest on the table. Because that's exactly where a lot of what we uncover and come across belongs. On the table. On the shelf. Not everything is for you. Not everything works out. Not all quote-unquote common sense makes sense for you, and that's okay. So 2023, thank you for another journey around the sun. Thank you for the hellos, the goodbyes, the wins, and the lessons. Thank you for the places I used to call home and the stories those places gifted me. What it all means, I still don't entirely know. But as I learned in your classroom 2023, it's okay. There's something incredible about the prospect of starting over. Not because you're unhappy with who you are, or because each step that brought you here wasn't perfect in its own unique way, but because somewhere deep down, we can feel the infinite. We know that when it comes to what's possible, we are a flicker of light in a galaxy of stars, waiting to take shape, find our way, to shine out across the very elements from which we came. See, beginning again simply means a new chapter. It means the next adventure. It's places you've never gone, people you've never met. It's stories untold and dreams still dancing around in your head. There's an old Dr. Seuss quote I remember as a kid. He said, sometimes you will never know the value of a moment until it becomes a memory. And turning the page on that chapter is, if nothing else, a temporary reminder that we are in the very moments we'll look back on and smile. It shines a spotlight on the people that mean the most and reassures us that the small stuff just might be the big stuff. After all, life doesn't dwell on the heartbreak or the times we fell, but the times we got back up. The times we looked with confidence at the road ahead and smiled at the horizon as each fleeting moment is discovered for the very first time. So here's to breathing in that ocean breeze, laughing until your stomach hurts. Here's to dreaming like there are no rules and living like there's no tomorrow. To creating your masterpiece, one word, one note, one brush stroke at a time. To dancing when the music isn't playing and sharing your song when it is. Here's to seeing the beauty when most walk right by it. Being light in darkness and a voice in silence. Here's to living life on your terms, paving your own path and writing your own story. The one where the hero doesn't stop until the princess is saved and the castle is taken. The one where reality is a reflection of imagination. Because if you do these things, when you look back years from now, you'll have a lot to say. But I promise you, I wish won't be one of them. Not because of what you were given, but because of what you chose to see. Hope. Such a beautiful thing. I love that we want more. I love that we're able to look around and see the opportunity and the possibility. I love that we know we can pick up a pen and change the script, rewrite the ending. That's why the new year is so powerful. Because with it comes hope. It forces us to sit down and think, reflect on the delta between how we're living and how we could be living. And anything that sparks a light in us is worthy of our attention, but also worth examining. Because here's what I want. I want those resolutions and those plans to materialize. I want the new you to start its incredible evolution. I want the journey to begin. But I also want you to understand why we so often miss the mark with this vision for tomorrow. Because the truth is, you will wake up January 1st and everything will, for a moment in time, feel new. As we turn the page, we are refreshed and invigorated. But new has a short lifespan. New eventually gives way to the same realities we've dealt with in the last chapter, the same struggles, the same obstacle. So no, the answer to change is not novelty, it can't be. Let's not latch on to something that will slip through our fingers like grains of sand on the beach. Let's change the way we look at sustainability. Let's take the complex and make it bite-sized. See, there's nothing more discouraging than wanting the moon and realizing every day that although you're climbing and climbing continuously, you have no moon to show for your work, for your ascent. That mentality takes your progress and dresses it up as a loss. It disguises your gain as not good enough. In fact, it makes it easy when life starts suggesting other plans, pointing to old routines, to wave goodbye to that moon and jump right back into the chapter you thought you left. To truly change, it's not to focus on the outcome, but rather on the little steps that make the outcome possible. Your New Year's resolution is not to be the fittest guy or girl at the gym. It's to say yes to the physical activity every day. When you don't want to and when you do, when you're busy and when you're not. It's saying yes every time you're called to duty. Because looking like a model next week is impossible. But saying yes when the world is begging you to say no, now that's doable. Resolutions fail because we resolve to be the hero but omit the hero's journey. Wanting more is beautiful. Thinking bigger is incredible. But this year, let's remember that those who obtain big things don't think of them as big things, but as little consistent commitments, as showing up and saying yes. Look, life will never change just because the calendar flipped. No, life is going to change because with the refresh button came the yes. The yes every day to one or two small things. And while most drop out, while most eye the discrepancy between where they are and the goal, you'll move forward, knowing that the only goal is to not quit. As Eckhart Tolle says, do not be concerned with the fruit of your action, just give attention to the action itself. The fruit will come of its own accord. So no, I don't believe in the new year, new you. But I do believe that if you're serious about change, the current you already has everything it needs. It's just waiting on you to look at the little things differently. To realize that when you're always focused on the finish line, it can do more harm than good. And your results, they will come. But not because you said yes to the finish line. No, it will come because you said yes consistently to each step that brought you there. And that's what's been missing. That's what matters. And that's why this year, this new year, will be the gateway to something spectacular. So I want to start with a story about cliff jumping with my friends maybe 4 years ago now. We flew into Las Vegas, spent some time in Vegas, and then we hit like national parks in Utah and then Arizona, and went all the way up the coast. When we were in Lake Tahoe, at the very end, there was this spot to cliff jump. This really, really high peak. And, you know, it's notorious, and it was just like a scary thing. And I remember walking up, there were 3 of us, and 2 other people were there. It's like you have to hike up to it. It's kind of in the woods a little bit. One of my buddies walked up, and, you know, we thought he was gonna jump right off. And he stood there and he looked down, and he looked down for I don't know how long, a while. You know, ultimately jumped. As far as I knew, I wasn't afraid of stuff like that, right? So I walk out and I look over the edge, and I could not bring myself to jump. Physically, I couldn't do it. Rationally, I couldn't speak myself or talk myself into it. There was no more rationality going on. It was just, I was frozen in fear. And I just remember sitting there and looking down. And, people would come up and ask about it, and they'd be like, can I jump? And I'm like, go ahead, right? Like it almost got to the point where it was hurting my pride, and I still couldn't jump. And I just stood there, and I stood there, and I stood there. I forget how long it took. I don't really know, and time was probably felt insane in that moment, but eventually I did, and it was incredible, right? It was a forever long drop, and just the adrenaline and the excitement, and you realize for a second that type of thing, that's peak living, and there's more of that out there in the world, and all of a sudden you want to capture it and obtain it, and you realize what you had been missing, and then my friend came up after me. He stood there for just as long too, right? It's a very weird thing, and it's hard to explain. There are so many situations that are this peak in our life, this cliff that we know we need to jump from. We know the other side is better, or we suspect, but we can't bring ourselves to do it. And this all came from a quote I found from John Green, one of my favorite authors. In his book, Paper Towns, it says, "It is so hard to leave until you leave. And then it is the easiest goddamn thing in the world." And that's right on the money, right? Being on the edge of that cliff, it is terror, sheer terror. It is so hard to make that jump, and then you do, and it's like life opens up. And it's the same thing in this case, right? It's so hard to leave until you do. It's terrifying to uproot, to change, to go somewhere you don't know. But once you do, life opens up. It's incredible. The other side is beautiful, and it's waiting for you. All of this is coming to a single point, a rule that I use to guide my decision making. And the rule is simple. If you are not content where you are, that is your reason to jump. Because on that cliff, rationality dissolves. The future is unknown, and it's scary. And how are you going to logically talk yourself into a scary unknown when you're at that point? You can't. It doesn't make sense. And I think that's why so many of us are scared to make that jump. And we ultimately turn back and we concede and go, okay, I'll just stick with what I have. This isn't great, but it is what it is. I can't bring myself to make that jump. Right? We're all there at some point. I've been there. I've been there with speaking. Big cliff for me when I first started. Ultimately jumped and put me on a trajectory that changed my life, right? Same thing with making videos, same thing with my first client. Like all these things, they're terrifying. And in the moment, you can't logically speak through them, so you just have to go. And it's like, well, how do you logically, you don't, you just go. Because if the present, here's the rule, if the present is not making you content, go, jump, right? Never forget that the path, the future is comprised of 1 trillion paths, and you can bend them and shape them and remake them. And sometimes it won't work. Sometimes it'll, blow up in your face. But again, you're still presented with an opportunity to adjust and remake and bend and reapproach and continue forward, right? The only way to lose is to stay on that cliff for the rest of your life. And so if you needed some type of rationality, if you needed some type of reason, I'm hoping that maybe I can give that to you today. If you are not content where you are, jump. because somewhere along the way, you'll figure it out. Every time I've jumped, it's changed my life for the better. Maybe not immediately, but ultimately. And as I say, that's what life's all about. So, hey, I hope you got something from this podcast. If you did, please subscribe, rate, review. Helps me get it out to the world. And guys, I appreciate that. And I will catch you tomorrow. Every so often, our paths lead us to a new door, a new opportunity to turn the handle and take a step into a world undiscovered, a metaphorical leap into what we can be. Not necessarily to escape our existing reality, but to build upon it. Right? The truth is, our existence, our potential, our capacity for greatness, it doesn't have a ceiling. It's not a glass of water that hits a point and spills over. We don't know where our genius ends. We've never seen our maximized capability. Our spirit ability to innovate, create, and change for the better, they know no bounds. And every time we walk up to one of these doors, right before we turn that handle, take that step, we're reminded of a very important truth. That this life has more in store. And that's incredible, because where you look for opportunity, you find it. And by the way, this would be far less significant if we weren't so inclined to forget. We often mistake our present reality for the reality. It becomes easier to see what's wrong than right. The risk towers over and intimidates the reward, and rather than move forward, we stay where we are. But this door, this opportunity, this minute is a hand extended to you. It's an ally, it's a road sign, emphasizing that yesterday doesn't define you. You're not your past. You're what you do from here on out. We have the ability to change, grow, become what we've always wanted to be, but it requires first that we stop, if only for a minute. We stop and acknowledge that we have no clue what life would be like operating on all cylinders, because we've never come close. It requires recognizing that our dreams become our reality when we remove the fictitious line that separates them. There's a famous saying, as you think, so you shall be. And before you dare step through that door, you have to acknowledge that. Soak it in. It is the single most important power granted to you. If you make excuses, you will become your excuses. But if you see the opportunity, you will always be greater tomorrow than you are today. This door presents options. You can spend half your life saying you're too young, the other half saying you're too old, or you can push that aside and move forward. This step is about no excuses. It's about no hesitation, no regrets, not complicating the things that are simple. We have a finite amount of time, and you can either make the most of it or let it pass you by. That's it. Because before you reached this door, the little things held you back. The criticism kept you stagnant. Fear made regret seem okay. But now is different. There's magic here, because it's here you can reassess what matters. You can remove the armor that was weighing you down. You can acknowledge that falling won't kill you. Get rid of safety at the expense of progress. Life has only begun, and right now the only action that's required is that you close your eyes and you see the possibility. Nothing else. You create what's in front of you. You put it there. It's your narrative. So let this step and every step that follows take you to a world you dream of, not a world you've settled for.
Sometimes all it takes is a reminder to help us realize what we have, what's possible, before you turn that handle. Leave the past behind you and move confidently into tomorrow. The path forward is not chance. It does not decide your fate, your greatness. You do. It's your decision. The path forward simply reinforces the choice you've made. So choose excellence and go make this year the best of your life. "22 lessons from 2022. Number 1, life has hidden costs. This is an idea that Jim Rohn spoke about a lot, really resonates with me. And it's something that I tried to keep front and center in 2022. Here's a quote from him. He says, "It isn't what the book costs, it's what it will cost if you don't read it." In other words, sometimes in an effort to avoid a price up front, we end up paying a greater price on the back end. Along the lines of, if you think going is expensive, wait until you see the price tag associated with not going. Missing that opportunity is what's expensive. But he also comes at it from another angle. He tells a story about his friend who bought a TV. When Jim asks him, "Hey, how much did that TV cost?" His friend says, $400. Jim says, "I don't think so. Try again." And his friend says, "Jim, I bought it. It was $400. And Jim says, "No, I think it's costing you millions." Referring to the amount of time that he wastes sitting in front of that TV when he could be improving his life, his business, his relationships, his health. Right? The moral of the story is sometimes what we don't do costs us more than we can imagine, and we have to be aware of those hidden costs. Lesson number 2, find the good. So this Christmas, I just got back from spending it with my family up in Boston, and while I was there, our cat that we've had for 20 years, since I was a kid basically, passed away. And, when we went to put her down, I was definitely sad about it. But it was even harder for me to see my mom and my sister, really devastated by it all. Having to say goodbye to Fuzzle, right? It's hard to see people you love in a dark place. And so as we walked out of the vet clinic the day after Christmas, I thought to myself, what's interesting is this whole thing was unavoidable, obviously. 20 years alone is a very long time for an animal or a cat to live. Our time here is temporary. We're passing by. And death aside, there are devastating things in life that are unavoidable, but you can't miss them, right? Pain is very good at making itself recognizable. We always seem to see it and feel it. But contrast that with the happy things, the meaningful things, the things that we appreciate. For some reason, they tend to be better at going undercover. Right? Like, we don't realize some of our most important moments were our most important moments until they're gone. And I look at this and it's like, okay, Fuzzle wasn't just our cat for 20 years. She was our childhood, and in a unique way, she represented the Christmases and the birthday parties, the sports games, the friends, graduating high school, going to college, moving to new places. A lot of things along the way. And I use this quote all the time because I just think it so perfectly captures the essence of what I'm trying to say here. Ed Helms' character in The Office, Andy Bernard, says, I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them. In other words, we can't be reminded enough to look for the meaningful things, the happy and beautiful things. I believe they're more numerous than the painful stuff. They're just so well camouflaged that we walk by them. We don't realize until 20 years later we look over our shoulder and go, yeah, that was special. 2022 taught me to be better at recognizing and appreciating those good things. Lesson number 3, sometimes progress is unremarkable. I was going through some older videos on my YouTube channel, and I found a few that I couldn't help but cringe watching back. And just to be clear, I'm proud of everything I've done. Everything played a role in getting me to where I am now. It's all a journey, and I did a lot of experimenting and pivoting and trying things, and I'm proud of that, right? But I took a little trip down memory lane to roughly 2017 to 2020. I was really experimenting, trying to craft my style. And I remembered how during that time, the viewership had dropped pretty substantially. Finances were inconsistent. I was looking ahead and starting to worry, right? And a lot of the time, I just felt embarrassed to still be going. Like my ego hurt when I woke up in the morning. That's just me being truthful. I was working so many hours, more hours than I'd ever worked, and was just seeing things slip. And looking back now, I realize how easy it would have been to quit during that stretch specifically. To have walked away and done literally anything else. But I didn't. I made adjustments, I got better, ultimately pushed through it. But the most important thing I've done in my life was keep going during that stretch. A powerful reminder just how unremarkable the most important progress we're making can seem. James Clear's ice metaphor. Water placed in a freezer doesn't immediately turn to ice. No, things are happening. Transformation is occurring long before we see that physical confirmation. It takes a while to hit that 32-degree mark, and I hope everyone is aware of that. Every step counts. And I learned this again and again. Lesson number 4, find and push out the negativity. In the book, It Takes What It Takes, author Trevor Moawad performed an experiment where he made a point for 30 days. And actually, I think he only got to maybe day 27 or 28. But regardless, he made a point to listen to and consume negative media. His list included country music, which was eye-opening for me. I listened to it all the time, but he references that joke, you play a country song in reverse, you get your wife, your trailer, your dog, and your job back, right? A lot of it's inherently sad stuff. He listened to national news nonstop, sad movies, and the list just goes on. And he said the change was so drastic that it was hard for him to function. He stopped feeling good about himself in social settings. He stopped early because it was so debilitating. And this got me thinking about what I consume. Let me tell you, there's a lot of negativity that creeps in there from a wide variety of places. And this is number 4, because I think we can all be better at recognizing and mitigating those things. Number 5, it's not about you. Or at least it's rarely about you. This is a quick reminder I picked up while working through the end of a lease for my apartment. A couple months ago, I decided I was going to renew for another year. But it just so happened that the process was a nightmare, right? Everything seemed to go wrong. Eventually, I got to the point where I started to get angry and took the situation personally. Enough was enough, right? So I went down, kind of barged into the office to ask what in God's name was going on, only to find the people that work there running around, trying to put out fires, help a bunch of folks with all these questions, and they were being patient and kind under the circumstances. And in that moment, I was reminded that I made something about me that has nothing to do with me. Like, was it annoying? Sure. But chill on the emotion, right? It's like detach yourself from the problem, and instead of throwing a temper tantrum like a 7-year-old, reallocate the energy to finding solutions. That was a great reminder at an important time. You know, it goes for so many things. Stop taking things personal that are, in actuality, not personal at all. Lesson number 6. It's okay to say no. All right, and this applies to a variety of areas. When things aren't right, a lot of the time you know immediately. Whether, in my case, it's a project I said yes to but felt burdened by and not excited about. Maybe a relationship that felt like a chore, but instead of walking away, you tried to negotiate with the pragmatic side of your brain. Or something you're spending a lot of time doing that you know isn't pushing you closer to where you want to be. You know, a lot of life is being able to break the complex down into the simple. And while immersed in these situations, or situations like them, you know, I frequently saw them as more complicated than they were, right? Rationalizing, well, maybe it's right, maybe I'll see down the road, you know, whatever the situation is. But there's a pretty simple rule here. If you get that feeling in your stomach that what you're doing is not aligned with who you are, or something isn't right, probably isn't. And at the very least, it requires some thought. I think we need to be better about trusting that intuition. The things you spend your time doing, the people you spend your time with, they shouldn't feel like a burden or a chore. They shouldn't break you down. No, they should, more often than not, light you up. Lesson number 7 is hope versus pragmatism. This year, both personally and professionally, I grew in a few areas. One of them was keynote speaking. Took part in some of the biggest speaking engagements of my career so far, and it was really cool to have taken part in them. But here's what I find interesting. Things seem to have happened so incrementally that I didn't even realize each event was an accomplishment or the completion of a personal goal until after the fact, like on the car on the way to the airport or on the plane, thinking, nice, that was awesome, right? Each event just seemed like the next logical thing. And that's one of my biggest lessons. When you're ready for something, it doesn't feel like the universe is doing you a favor. There is no hoping. There are no crossed fingers. It's just you doing you. It's the compounding of effort. And when I go back to some of my previous New Year's Eve thinking, it was, man, I hope this is the year I get that big break. I hope this is the year I reach more people. Everything happens. It all changes. But at the time, I wasn't ready for any of those things I was hoping for. What we get is proportional to the value we add, and I had a lot to learn. The overall point being, don't ask the world to give you anything. Ask yourself to live your life in such a way that you are ready for it. Build yourself up in such a way that you don't even notice the transformation. Lesson number 8, turn your goals into a lifestyle. There are things that I wanted to change in 2022. I wanted to stay healthy, and that meant less injuries. It meant cross-training, diversifying my workout. It meant eating healthier. And where I saw the most progress was when I stopped looking at each of those changes as one-off alterations and saw everything in totality as a lifestyle change I was making. One of my favorite quotes is, people follow through on who they believe themselves to be. Well, when I started thinking of myself as a healthy, athletic person, living a healthy, athletic lifestyle, not only did things feel right, but I found everything easier to maintain. When something's your identity, almost subconsciously, you push out the things that don't fit that personal identity. You invite in the things that do. And of course, our lives are the manifestation of the little things we do, right? The compounding of habits. But to me, this highlights the value of creating an umbrella for those little things to fit under. Human beings are storytellers, so tell yourself the right story. Reverse engineer the big picture goal. When you adjust and create a lifestyle, change is inevitable. Lesson number 9, make it count. So this is about the Charlotte airport. Someone once asked me if I'd been to Charlotte. And I thought, not really, right? The airport doesn't count. I didn't see any of the culture or the food or the sports teams or any of that stuff. Which got me thinking, what does make you present? What makes anything count? Did you really have dinner with someone if you were both on your phones the whole time? I'm not so sure. Did today count? If every second you were consumed with worries about what's coming in the future, constantly replaying the past? Maybe. Who's to say? Obvious gray area here. But I'd like to more frequently and definitively move the needle in 2023 to the it counts category of life. Now, I still have to figure out exactly what that means and how it will play out. But I know I can't let my time on this planet be a metaphorical passing through the Charlotte airport. In a world where distraction seems to be everywhere, I want to position myself to live fully. Lesson number 10. First, find faith in yourself. One of my favorite stories this year was when I was having dinner with a friend of mine, and he was reflecting back on an investment he made to be mentored by someone he thought very highly of. It was like a 2-day job shadow. And he's going through the experience, telling me how he flew over there, met up with the guy. And the entire thing was underwhelming. He was unorganized, seemed to be winging it, wasn't a very nice guy. And my natural reaction was to say, man, I'm so sorry to hear that. And I'll never forget him pausing and saying the line, oh no, Eddie, that was the best investment I ever made. I learned that if this guy can do it, then so can I, right? What's my excuse? So much of our success is predicated upon us giving ourselves permission to achieve it. Step 1 is always believe yourself worthy of the journey. Lesson number 11. What you do speaks so loud that I cannot hear what you say. That's a quote from Emerson. And this one's short and sweet. Remember that what people in your life tell you is one thing, but it's what they do that means the most. The way I see it, words are meant to supplement action and nothing more. Lesson number 12. The old way isn't always the right way. Something that stuck with me as a creator and a business owner was someone telling me that I had to make some substantial changes to the way I approach my business. And after explaining that, hey, this approach has been incredibly valuable to me in the past, they responded, well, if where you are is where you aim to stay, then yeah, of course, don't change. And that simple statement helped me gain some perspective. Right? As the saying goes, what got you to where you are is not the same thing that's required to get you to where you need to be next. You don't climb a 1,000-foot mountain the same way you climb a 20,000-foot mountain. You don't make 6 figures the same way you make 7 figures. Adjustments have to be made. And that's not a referendum on your previous approach, that's just evolution. You have to evolve along with your ambition. Lesson number 13. Embrace the turbulence. I was on a flight and we hit some turbulence at some point. And no matter how many times I go through this, I can't help but feel that unease in my stomach. Right? When I got home, I actually Googled the question, how many flights have crashed due to turbulence? Surprising to find that answer to be 0. No plane has ever crashed because of turbulence. Still, even after that, right, when I sit through turbulence on planes, that same feeling surfaces. Fear. No matter what we're doing in life, we'll never completely detach from fear. The unknown is an innately scary thing. Now, this is not that feeling of moral or personal conflict I mentioned earlier, when you know in your heart you're stepping into shoes that aren't your own. I'm talking about knowing something is right, but fearing the road before you, a very human thing. Change comes with turbulence. It's inescapable, it's unavoidable. But down the road, we often find it was a small price to pay for the new reality we've just made for ourselves. Lesson number 14. Expect a lot of yourself, but give yourself grace. Life is often a dance between extremes. Aim high, but step small. Hold a vision, but make, tangible, pragmatic moves. If there's something I'm guilty of doing, it's setting the target incredibly high, and then when the swings and misses inevitably happen, being very upset with myself. Sometimes you don't get through everything you plan to do. Sometimes the outcome falls short, and that's okay. Make the adjustments. Be proud of yourself for expecting great things of yourself and come back better tomorrow. Being your own toughest critic only makes sense if you are your own greatest ally. Which leads perfectly into lesson 15. Yesterday is merely a data point. There's a quote that states the windshield is bigger than the rear view for a reason. Well, one thing that life has emphasized this year is that when you attempt to innovate and try new things, you'll make mistakes. You just will, that's how it goes. It can be frustrating, replaying the story in your head again and again, the if-onlys and I wish I hads. But there's no sense in doing that, because life gave you something valuable. It gave you a data point. So take that and use it to guide and shape future decisions. The rear view gives you a condensed depiction of what's behind you because its role, while valuable, is nowhere near as powerful as what's before you in the present. Lesson number 16, distraction versus achievement. This is another quote I came across in 2022 that is extraordinary. It's Robin Sharma. He says, you can either be distracted or you can do incredible things, but you cannot do both. That is everything. And it's something I come face to face with every day. To the point where, as I've said before, I have to put my phone in a different room. Sometimes even cut the internet when I write. Because if there's room for distraction, it always seems to find a way. When there's so much distraction in our world. Very obvious example, right? I post my work on like 9 or 10 different social media platforms. It would be crazy for me not to care at all about them once I send it out there, right? Of course I'm intrigued and curious. I want to see how it affected people, what they're saying, right? But being better at emotionally detaching once I hit that upload button has been incredibly valuable for me. As well as, like I alluded to before, creating boundaries between myself and the technology that houses that back and forth. And it begs the question, what are your distractions? What can you do to mitigate them? Deep Work by Cal Newport is an amazing read for those looking for strategies on this topic to build upon. I cannot recommend it enough. Number 17, you're never alone. I've noticed that when we feel most vulnerable, we feel the most alone. Those two things, in my experience, always seem to go hand in hand. But I think it's a feeling that's detached from reality. Right? We are all working, fighting, climbing. So many folks out there are battling their own private hell. In fact, I hear every day from so many incredible people overcoming such a variety of obstacles that it's changed the way I look at the human experience. I see how powerful human beings can be on a daily basis. How we all have our own battles, but we are also all equipped to persevere. And sometimes I imagine in our darkest moments how incredible it would be to jump into this instant conversation or Zoom call with millions of others going through something similar, everyone feeling like they are the only ones until they see that reassurance, until they hear the voices of others battling as well. Because half the fight is knowing that you are not alone, and I can assure you, you never are. Lesson 18. It isn't until it is. Remember that everything is crazy until it's not. Everything is imaginary until it's in front of your face. It's the ability to, as many people describe it, play the fool that changes things. To do big things, you have to start at square one. You have to be vulnerable enough to step out, to see the unseen, walk the path untraveled. And it's a gauntlet that, while not fun to run, is the only way to get to innovation and change. You have to step into a world that is not yours in order to make it so. Everything isn't until it is. Lesson number 19, invest in yourself. Often effort brings tangible results, right? But sometimes the most important investments don't pay dividends immediately. It's a long-term play on our personal capability, right? Like reading every day, for example, doesn't bring a tangible result. You don't close the book and see more clients or a bigger bank account. But when there are one or two ideas or strategies from that book that you can now implement into everything you do moving forward, those hours spent reading become truly invaluable. And that's just it. We want results and we want wins, but we have to remember that investing in ourselves positions us for an unlimited tomorrow. Lesson number 20, life is an adjustment game. As I've been trying to expand what I'm doing, I consistently find standard operating procedure being something I stumble into. Basically things rarely work flawlessly the first time. Throwing things against the wall, picking up the pieces, adjusting, and repeating, right? That's how you learn, oh wow, okay, this works. Let's do more of that. And that's an entirely different philosophy than expecting excellence out of the gate. In many ways, I don't even aim for the bullseye. I aim to be near it with the trust and understanding that I'll get there in due time. Life is not a perfection game. It will never be a perfection game. It's an adjustment game. Lesson number 21, you are always one decision away. Once you understand this, you understand that you're never down and out. It's never the end. You've never lost. No, it's about using what's around you to make the decision that will change your life. There's a change you can make right now, in this moment, that will redirect your life trajectory. There's something you can do in this moment that will make you better, happier, more fulfilled. Step 1 is understanding that. Step 2 is seeking that decision out. No matter how lost or stuck you feel, I wholeheartedly believe this to be true. And lastly, lesson 22, you can often get 2 for the price of 1. This is the ever-relevant idea that although we feel like working harder is the answer, it's often working smarter. It's utilizing what's around us. And I'm speaking after a year of primarily being in the digital space, but this applies to so much more. There's so many ways to utilize and streamline what we do, to repurpose our effort, to take our work and utilize it in a slightly different way. Take a concept and share it to a different audience, maybe in a different place, on a different platform. I've noticed that so many of my greatest wins come from very small alterations to something that already exists, or repurposing an idea. Maybe the story's slightly off. Maybe the delivery needs a little bit of a change, or maybe it just wasn't the right time the first time. I catch myself looking outward for never before seen solutions when what I need is already in the palm of my hand. Start from the premise that you have everything you need and work backwards. You will be amazed at what you find. I hope these lessons will bring you as much value as they brought me, and that next year we will all be better off because of it. Wishing you a safe, happy, healthy, prosperous 2023.